Banlist! So, Bushiro just had its strategy presentation in Japan, which means we're getting a new Japanese ban list, and seeing as how all of our English ban lists are usually just a copy-paste of Japan's ban lists, let's go over it and react, shall we? So, first things first, they are hitting Varlord to 1. We are choice restricting Sergawon and Reziel. Charmnet is getting hit to 2, and they are undoing some of the hits to Gondiva and Shoujo Doji, moving their cards that were at 1 to 2. So, this is a pretty banger ban list, all things considered. You know, Bob Sagra was getting a lot of results. A lot of people were predicting a Bob Sagra Tier 0 format, and Varlord was the most obvious hit for that deck. It just does so much. Is the way that you can loop your arms card, so you can use it to loop the shield to draw a bunch of cards, or later in the game you can loop the sword and gain a bunch of power. The 10k to the front row plays really well with the new restanding grade 2. Like, it was just doing so much for the deck, and hitting it to 1, especially because it's an older card too, they're not going to hit any of the newer stuff, was probably the hit that made the most sense. I find it unfortunate that we had to let Varlord die for the sins of the Restander. Like, theoretically, you could already do what the deck was doing with Varlord in previous iterations of the deck. Like, you could loop the Spear to get extra drive or extra draws if you really wanted to, and it wasn't doing a whole lot. But now that the deck has both better arms cards that are worth looping and a Restanding grade 2 that benefits a lot from the 10k to the front row, especially if you can get multiple Varlords overdressed, it can really get out of hand, so this makes sense. It's just a little sad that we kind of had to get rid of the cool thematic card for the deck in favor of keeping the Restander, which was probably always going to happen, let's be real. The Reziel hit, you could see this one coming from Orbit, I think. As soon as they released this guy, Knight of Severe Spear, Savalus, the guy that's like, okay, if placed by Reziel, you give your front row 5k, and then at the end of the battle it boosted, you can bind it to draw a card. Everyone immediately clocked like, so this is like the worst version of Sergawon that they want you to play when they inevitably hit the real one. So, I think everyone could see this coming. I knew they were going to choice restrict it eventually, and I figure they weren't going to ban Sergawon outright because of decks like Hound Razor, which is just Sergawon deck. Charmnet to 2. It's a really big power card for Levy Dross. It gets you really big columns. It also gets you a lot of draw power, being able to like retire it to draw. And if you can have multiple copies of Charmnet on the field, you can really stack up a lot of power and advantage, so just hitting it to 2 kind of helps curb that a little bit. You're less likely to see it. If anything, I feel like they could have been more heavy-handed with this hit. Like, they could have easily put Charmnet to 1 just to prevent that possibility of having 2 on the field altogether. With like the Infinity Eyes, eventually you'll probably just draw into it, and you can also add in like Mythiarch Habitat to kind of make up both the deck space and the consistency for finding Charmnet. So it's a perfectly fine hit. If anything, it could have been heavier, but I'm biased against Levy Dross. I'm going to be for real. I don't like the deck being able to just combo off turn 3 while you're still at grade 2 and do like an end game combo. I've said all this before. You know, like, I wish they would just hit it entirely just to like prevent this from happening at all. And then the unhits to Dragon Empire are fine. Shoujo Doji pretty much fell off as soon as they hit Izasao. And then Strigna, that was a big hit to Gondiva back in the day. The deck has seen like some success here and there with the mask version, so I guess they're afraid of going too heavy on the Gondiva unlimits lest it becomes like the best deck again. So this seems fine, right? And alongside the ban list, they also released their justifications for it. So the things they are overall looking at are just the things that have high performance. So like the new buff Sagra, Reziel, Levy Dross are all the obvious one, but Artisaria is also seeing a lot of play, although unlike Bob Sagra, which was by far the most popular deck, Artisaria really didn't convert. I think If I remember correctly, looking at tournament statistics, Artisario was something like 9%, where Bavsagra was like the highest with like 20. But Bavsagra converted really well to the point where it was like the majority of top cuts, where I don't think Artisaria converted at all. So they probably weren't going to hit the deck, although we do still have a few unknown lyrical reveals, so it's entirely possible we have more Artisaria support coming, which is why they might be concerned about it. They're also looking at Love and Berry because that was topping a whole lot, as well as Elid Glemma, but that seems like more of an EN problem. We really like the high roll of Elid Glemma, and if I was going to criticize the ban list, other than feeling a little light on Levy Dross, no hit to like Moe Flash really feels like, huh? So, based on that, they're hitting Bob Sagra because by far the most representation and has an extremely high win rate. Like, it was really obvious that this was going to get hit. It was just that powerful. Reziel still sees an extremely high amount of use and like a decent win rate, so they're restricting it. Same with Levi Dross, like high use, decent win rate. Artisaria has a lot of use, but doesn't win a whole lot, so they're just kind of keeping their eye on it. Where, like, if the other decks kind of get weaker, Artisaria might rise up and warrant hits in the future. And then, you know, uh, Love and Berry as well as Elid Glemma have very high win rates, but only have like moderate use rates. So it seems like they're only avoiding hitting it due to a lack of popularity, which I don't know. Like, I feel like Elid Lemma is a style of deck that just isn't healthy for the game, just being this big dumb OTK where you don't play. Just that shouldn't exist. Just get rid of the Moe Flash, please. So yeah. Their explanations for the cards being hit, Varlord, it seems like they're mainly concerned with or the two things they're concerned with are the high power, obviously. 10k to the front row is a lot when you can make up towards of 5 attacks, but also the ability to like cycle your arms cards. So like in the early game, you can use the shield multiple times to draw a whole bunch and kind of just dig deeper into the deck. Combine that with like Cindy, so like if your opponent somehow puts the Varlord in the drop zone, or you mill it yourself, it's like, okay, Cindy, put it into Soul, grab the Varlord back, overdress it. And again, because Bob Sagra is borderline tier 0, like they're just gonna hit it to get rid of the deck. You know? The hit to Sergauon, this has been around forever. I think the combo has been legal the entire time of Raziel's existence. And it's like, okay, well, it gives you high power, it gives you early card advantage, you can recycle it all the time with the ability of Raziel, so it's like, just get rid of it. We have a worse version of the card now, so get rid of Sergauon, force them to play the worst version of it. And then Charmnet, like I said, like the high attack power, the ability to like get multiples of them on the board. So like you call one from drop, call a second one from hand. You can make some really big columns. You're drawing a bunch of cards. It's just really strong. If anything, like I said, I feel like this is a little too light. And then for both of the Dragon Empire cards, kind of the same reasoning. Both of these decks have fallen off, so they're lifting the restrictions. So yeah, overall, pretty good ban list. Curious to see where the meta will shift from here. It seems like Levidross is the one that can most easily adapt to its hit. Like, Charmnita 2 is not game ending, and with the addition of cards like Mythiarch Habitat, it might even feel like the deck hasn't changed at all. Uh, Bob Sagra is probably the deck that changes the most. When I first tested Bob Sagra, I came away with the impression that the deck was strong but not overwhelming. Probably because I did not understand the Varlord loop when the deck first released, that just wasn't on my mind. And now that it's not really a thing anymore, or a thing that you can only do like sparingly, it's like, okay, the deck probably falls back into where I originally thought it was, which is that it can be very strong. It still has a very high ceiling if you do find the Varlord, but it's not going to be this overbearing tier 0 threat anymore. And then Reziel, probably the easy adaptation is Painkiller Angel. I imagine they'll also play this new grade 1, so like, the deck probably survives, though it's probably not going to be as strong. Personally, I don't like Reziel very much. He's kind of my nemesis just because I have now been traumatized by him twice. That one time my opponent miracle healed 2 times and blew me out of the game, and just recently at the BCS where a Resile opponent just trigger sacked the ever loving hell out of me. So I'm personally completely fine with this deck being punched into the dirt. And, hopefully they will eventually hit Ella Glemma just because that deck is not fun or healthy. And then finally, the EN Twitter account posted this somewhat ominous image that the English deck construction rules will be updated on March 31st. And according to a bunch of other people, this is not the same wording that they normally use for just announcing a ban list, which means one, we don't know when we're gonna get this ban list. Like, it would be interesting to see if Varlord is just like pre-hit coming into English. That's kind of one of the downsides of us being so far behind JP. But I think the thing a lot of people are predicting is like specifically because it's deck construction rules, they might just ban all the grade ones that make crests or like errata them in some way so you can't get the pressed and premium anymore. There's also a possibility they might introduce energy into premium, which would be interesting to like shake up the format, although it also might be very unhealthy just giving a bunch of decks access to a free resource all of a sudden. We'll see how that shakes out. But for now, I believe that will be the end of this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye!